Alright, my first build in Lightfall, and it's perfect for this season. I used this build all the way through the Legendary campaign, and if you're already a fan, you'll know why I'm still using it now. We'll go through this video without using any seasonal artifact mods first. Then, at the end, I'll show you which ones are the best for enhancing the build. Here's how I am using the Dawn Chorus exotic in Season 20. Dawn Chorus is a Warlock exotic helmet that both empowers the Solar Super, Dawnblade, and the damage of Scorch applied to enemies. Scorch is a stacking debuff that causes tick damage which increases as more stacks are applied. Once a target reaches 100 stacks of Scorch, they ignite with a solar explosion, damaging them and surrounding enemies. Scorch will decay from a target if no new stack has been applied in the last 2 seconds. We'll talk about the different ways to apply Scorch later in the video. Now let's talk about the Dawn Chorus perk, Rites of Ember. This perk triples the Scorch damage you apply to enemies in PvE and makes Daybreak projectiles apply 60 Scorch stacks per hit to an enemy. It both massively buffs the neutral gameplay of Solar Warlocks in PvE, while also making the Super a viable boss damage option. My goal in this build is to apply as many Scorch stacks to as many enemies as possible, while having uptime on my abilities and sustain with health regen. So what aspects and fragments shall we use to get the most out of these Scorch stacks? I use Touch of Flame, as this aspect enhances our solar grenades for free, and better grenades means more Scorch stacks applied. We're also going with the Heat Rises aspect, as Final Blows while Heat Rises is active grants melee energy. When we get to the mods, I'll explain how melees are crucial to this build. For the fragments, I've chosen Ember of Ashes. This fragment increases the amount of Scorch stacks we apply to targets by 50% in most cases. For example, Dawnblade projectiles will now apply 90 Scorch stacks per hit. Ember of Searing. Defeating a Scorch target grants melee energy and spawns a Fire Sprite. Fire Sprites are little floating flames that when picked up grant grenade energy. Ember of Mercy. Picking up a Fire Sprite grants restoration. This allows us to get into the fight and stay alive longer. We have a few options for the last fragment slot. We could go Resolve to get healed after a grenade kill. Ember of Char to spread Scorch stacks when we ignite an enemy. As a side note, Dawn Chorus does not buff ignition damage. The choice here is actually situational, depending on the content you're doing. I've gone with Ember of Wonder. Rapidly defeating targets with solar ignitions generates an Orb of Power. We need our Orbs of Power so that we can generate armor charges for our armor mods. To get the most out of Heat Rises, we're going to use Phoenix Dive for our class ability, as it synergizes really well with this build and in my opinion is better than a Rift sometimes. There's a couple of options we can go for our grenades. As we're using Touch of Flame, this limits us to Healing Solar, Firebolt and Fusion grenades. So how much Scorch do each of these grenades apply? Well, Healing is out of the option as it doesn't apply any Scorch. Fusion grenades do not apply double Scorch damage when they explode with Touch of Flame. They only apply the base 40 Scorch stacks, plus 20 with the fragment. However, they do a lot of damage, so they are a viable option. My top 2 choices are Solar and Firebolt grenades. Solar grenades will apply 20 Scorch on impact and will keep applying 14 Scorch per second, thus utilising more of the benefit from the Dawn Chorus exotic. Firebolts apply 20 Scorch to all enemies in a wider radius, and have a shorter cooldown. Both of these are great options. In Season 20, we have artifact mods that boost our Firebolt grenades, so you'll see me using these in the background gameplay footage. The Warlock melee abilities both apply Scorch. 10 per projectile for Celestial Fire, so 30 in total, and 20 per projectile, 100 in total, for the Snap. Incinerating Snap fires in a horizontal pattern, so it's hard to hit all of them on one target for an instant ignition. We're going to use the Incinerating Snap as it has a shorter cooldown and can hit multiple enemies. Okay, so what weapons apply Scorch, and which are the best to use? From the footage you can probably guess which I have chosen, but let's go through the other contenders. This season saw many weapons get the Solar 3.0 treatment and have Scorch applied to their perks. 1000 Voices, a heavy fusion rifle that applies Scorch on hit. Sunshot's Final Blow Explosions apply 10 Scorch. Polaris Lance's 5th shot applies 40 Scorch. Two-Tailed Fox applies 60 Scorch from the Solar Rocket. Skyburner's Oath applies 3 Scorch per hit-fired shot. And Prometheus Lens had Incandescent applied to its Catalyst perks. Now, any weapon with Incandescent will work. Namely, the challenger to Prometheus Lens, Retraced Path, with Enhanced Subsistence and Incandescent. This is a great legendary option, and you can pair it with 1000 Voices or Two-Tailed Fox. I've gone with Prometheus Lens due to its exotic perk, which applies Scorch on sustained damage hits. You can pair this with any weapon that has Demolitionist, Osmosis or Incandescent to get the most out of the build. High-end content and champions may dictate your choices too. Now onto stats and mods. In the new armor charge system, all choices here can be done without any seasonal artifact buffs, which reduce the cost of certain mods. For the helmet mods, I've gone with the Harmonic Siphon, as rapid kills with Prometheus Lens or a Solar Heavy will generate orbs of power. We can also slot in a special ammo finder to keep using our trace rifle, and if you're playing with a fire team, you can use Special Ammo Scout to give them extra drops too. We have a few options on our gauntlets, but we need to include Impact Induction, which reduces our grenade cooldown on powered melee damage. You'll be getting your melee back very quickly while using Heat Rises, so this mod is a must to keep the gameplay loop going. Heat Rises also gives us Restoration when casting Phoenix Dive and applies Scorch to nearby enemies when we land, so we can use our class ability more to both keep us alive or do damage. We can use Focusing Strike, which grants class ability when we damage an enemy with our melee. As an option, you can use Firepower to create orbs of power on grenade kills. I feel as though I wasn't utilising this mod enough, and most of my orbs came from Prometheus Lens and the Siphon mod. This is why we are using Ember of Wonder Fragment to create orbs. Now, we must choose between Font of Focus to passively buff our grenade energy by plus 30 in stats, or Grenade Kickstart, which consumes our armor charge to give back 30% energy at 3 charges. As we gain grenade energy from so many different sources, a passive buff might not be worth it, so I'm using Grenade Kickstart. The chest mods are quite simple. Charged up for 1 extra stack of armor charge. Then use a damage resist mod for the activity. Concussive Dampener is great for most. Then use a 3 energy stat mod and harmonic resist to reduce incoming solar damage. For our leg mods, we are buffing damage to our solar weapons with Solar Surge. We are then using 2 orb pickup mods, one to grant grenade energy and one to give us a heal on picking up an orb of power. If you find you don't need the extra healing, you can double up on the Solar Surge mods for an extra boost. On the class item, I suggest using Time Dilation to increase the length of the armor charges you have. Although using Grenade Kickstart will consume all the charges, it's good to keep them longer in between you throwing the grenades. Bomber will grant us grenade energy when we cast our class ability, which is being regenerated from the Focusing Strike mod on our gauntlets. As a little extra help to boost class ability usage, Font of Restoration fits in perfectly to complete the build. With the stat distribution, this will depend on which and if you have used font mods. Our fragments are giving us plus 20 to resilience and plus 10 to recovery. With the base stats of my armor pieces, this brings my resilience to 90, which is a 27% damage reduction in PvE. I'll take my chances with the other 3% instead of using a mod to get to 100. From here, as I'm using a recovery font, the stat mods used get my recovery to 70, and then I have prioritised Discipline from there. In Season 20, we have some amazing mods that will buff this build beautifully. Firstly, we have authorised mods. These look like they'll come back in the future, but for now we have Solar and Grenades, reducing the cost of armour mods affecting solar weapons or grenades. Solar Surge grants us an armour charge when we pick up a Fire Sprite, meaning we could swap Ember of Wonder out but create less orbs. Shatter Orbs could fill the role of orb generation, as breaking a combatant's shield for the first time with the matching damage type creates an orb of power. Flare Up means that our Firebolt grenades grant more Scorch stacks, doing more damage with Dawn Chorus. And Rain of Firebolts gives us an extra charge of the Firebolt grenade, so we get more use of our mods that grant grenade energy and increase our damage output. So that's the whole build and every bit of theory behind it. Now, how does the gameplay loop work? Start off by consuming a grenade to get heat rises active, defeat enemies with your weapons and melee while in the air to generate orbs, and use Phoenix Dive to disengage and heal. Picking up orbs should get your grenade back, so you can fly in the air and throw grenades from afar. Snap your melee to apply as much Scorch as possible, causing enemies to ignite, creating more orbs which you pick up to heal and get your grenade back, etc, etc. You're able to use your abilities as often as you want. The Dawnblade super grants Phoenix Dive energy while the super is active, so you can swing your blade and then cast Phoenix Dive to land next to targets and immediately ignite them, or use Phoenix Dive to damage multiple enemies with its AoE. Within these combinations, you have high damage output for both single targets and multiple enemies. You have sustain from healing and a way to help with ammo economy. Right now, I can't see a way this build getting any better. Well, I hope you enjoyed my first build in Lightfall. You know me as Snorlax. I'll catch you later.